Interesting. Here we go. Let's try that. No, that's not it either. This is it. Here we go. How's that?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. And if I page down, it changes. Okay. All right, very good.
Yeah, let's just give it a couple more minutes to see some people are still coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. People will take a couple minutes to trickle in. I did get the YouTube live stream going. Again, we usually see a good pickup there, about 10 to 15 additional people. And there is a chat also on YouTube. So when you get to the Q&A, if anybody wants to just keep an eye over there and bring questions in here, that would be great. And let me now set you as host, Chris. I did get the YouTube live stream. Yeah, so Chris, you're set as host, and I unfortunately do have to drop in a minute, but Karen is here as well and can support. So if anything comes up, just let her know.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your help, David, and we'll maybe touch base after this.
Of course. Yes, yeah. Thanks. Hope it goes well.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. All right, let's just give it a couple more minutes and then we can get started. All right, I think we can get started now. So welcome everyone to the Hyperledger New York City meetup. We're really pleased to have you all here today, and also very appreciative of our two presenters, Gary Crisci from General Electric and Robert Van Donge from IntellectEU, presenting on how to tackle the hurdles of implementing enterprise blockchain. So Gary's going to start off by showing how GE used blockchain to improve intercompany transactions and tackle the hurdles there. And then Robert will be following that up with how IntellectEU has implemented several blockchain applications and how they used that experience in implementing those applications to develop their own blockchain platform as a service that is designed to abstract away those obstacles. We're currently recording live on YouTube, and we would ask that you ask any questions either in the chat here on the Zoom call or on the YouTube page, and I will be addressing those questions, at the end of each presentation. But I think right now we can get started, and Gary, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. Glad you could be here. This is a great opportunity to share some information that we have about a proof of concept project that we worked on and where we are today with our learnings from that. And I'm excited to do this for the Hyperledger community. I've done this presentation a few different times in some different forums. Had some plans to do some out on the road, and unfortunately, due to the pandemic, that kind of disrupted those plans. So I'm happy to see that we're doing these virtual events and we're still able to get out there and share this information. So I'm going to run through some slides here and talk about what we did in this project. First off, just a little bit about GE. I assume many people have if not most of you, have heard of General Electric. Been around for a very long time. Operates in a number of different verticals and industries, primarily in aviation and healthcare and energy. So those are some of the key areas that we focus. I actually work at GE Corporate. which is the parent organization over the different business units. So a little bit about myself. I'm principal architect at GE Corporate, and you can look me up on LinkedIn. I have my colleague Francisco Ponce on here. He usually does this presentation with me. Today I'll be flying solo. He was the program manager, so I was the technical architect. He was the program manager, and we worked together on this. So I like to give him credit because he had a lot to do with it. Today's agenda, talk about the problem statement and the solution overview that we looked at. I'm going to do an introduction to blockchain and Hyperledger Fabric. I'm going based on the premise that most people on this call have a pretty good foundation in what blockchain is and what Hyperledger Fabric is specifically, but I will touch on that, and we could even dig into it a little deeper in the Q&A for those of you who are more experienced. I'll review the solution architecture. We'll talk about analytics on top of blockchain, which was a key component of what we did here. Blockchain itself is one piece of a broader solution to the entire problem. So we're going to talk about analytics, and then we'll do the closing and the Q&A. Okay, so the challenge was to modernize our internal billing system. And so today, GE uses a centralized mainframe application, so about 25 plus years old. We run about 4 million invoices, intercompany invoices through this system every year. And like many mainframes, obviously it's an older technology, very high total cost of ownership in the form of hardware, and as well, the software and skills, right? Talent pool, people with specialized skills who know how to run that. So what we wanted to look at was, what could we do with a distributed ledger to solve for this problem, right? And so if we looked at integrating the finance systems, we wanted a mobile first front end. We wanted to do a microservice architecture, dispute management platform, which we didn't have. And as I mentioned earlier, smart analytics. Okay, so the first thing we did, we kind of took a page out of our enterprise architecture handbooks and said, well, let's start off with a capabilities model, right? And I'll even take a step back to just say, you know, this is kind of the functional slide, right? So for those of you who are unaware, I should probably take a quick second to explain what is an intercompany transaction, right? So basically an intercompany transaction is when two organizations that are owned by the same parent organization buy and sell goods to each other. And the reason why it's called intercompany is because you have to eliminate those transactions before you report your earnings to Wall Street. So if aviation buys technology from power for a turbine, or if they buy pieces, let's say they buy pieces of a turbine to use in a jet engine because there's some similar technology there, that revenue cannot be reported to Wall Street because all we did was move cash internally within our organization. So as I mentioned before, there's about 4 million of those transactions, very high volume, a lot of money. And there's a significant cost associated with intercompany transactions because you do have to move cash. And anytime you move cash, you incur bank fees and the challenges that are associated. If any of you have worked in treasury, you're familiar with that whole model of what goes on in a treasury organization. So what you really want to do is you want to try to minimize that cash flow movement. So if I owe you 500 and you owe me 1,000, rather than making two payments, we can net that out and make one payment of just 500. So that's part of our capabilities model also, is the ability to net these transactions so that we can optimize cash flow. Okay, so within the capabilities model here, you can see this was kind of the functional approach of what does the application need to do? And there was some color coding in here around things that the current system does, things that are nice to have, things that are must have, and so how we could approach that. And so we broke it out into these different pillars, and we had these different tasks that the new system would have to do, because it's also good time to mention, we did not just evaluate blockchain. We did look at other potential technologies to solve this problem. This third-party SaaS application, SaaS software by a vendor is something that we looked heavily at. And we also evaluated keeping the mainframe, but just hosting it in a cloud provider on an emulator. So while that does not solve my problem of older processes, limited talent pool to run the application and still running on that mainframe software, I would be able to eliminate the hardware. And that's a significant piece of the cost. So those were the three main options that we looked at. Okay, so moving along into the blockchain solution, this is the design overview we came up with. And if we look at kind of that capabilities model and how would we kind of take those requirements and feed them into different tiers within a blockchain solution. So we really looked at wing to wing. You'll see as I go through the solution architecture, blockchain is just a piece of it. And that's important to recognize. Blockchain is basically, it's effectively a data tier, right? So there's still going to be a whole lot of other things that you have to deal with in terms of integration, reporting and analytics, UI for the end users. So we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff. But the goal here was to connect all our different ERP systems through this integration layer and have an application that is governed by smart contracts, or in layman's terms, business rules, right? So you can see the different tiers: user interface, data warehouse, blockchain with the smart contracts, the integration layer, and ultimately the ERPs. Because what we're really doing in a distributed ledger is we're saying, I have a ledger over here in one business, you have a ledger over there in another business, and now we're going to have a shared ledger that we both communicate with so that we could make the process of sharing transactions and reconciling those transactions easier. And that's why when people ask me, why would you need blockchain for an organization like GE, where everyone is technically in the same organization, if you really look at the inherent capabilities of a distributed ledger, as I'm going to talk about some more in some future slides, you're really going to start to see how a consortium of companies under a conglomerate really make up a very good use case for blockchain. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, and these were kind of the solution benefits that we were going for. So why blockchain? Okay, so 4 pillars here that we really kind of honed in on. We acknowledge that blockchain has moved beyond the hype, and we think that there is a enterprise value here. Trust is a big one, and this is one that we always would get questioned on right off the bat. Why do you need trust if it's intercompany? Most people think of blockchain as a solution for dealing with external counterparties and entities who you don't know, and so you can't trust them. And so you need that immutable smart contract to govern the transactions. And that's true. And in that sense, maybe we didn't need blockchain. But trust is much more than just filtering out malicious or bad activity. It's, I have to trust you to do it the right way. We have to trust each other to do transactions the way we agreed. And a perfect example of that is, you could have an intercompany charge every month. Let's say a business is being charged for my services. I'm consulting with a business and they're charging and it's X amount of dollars a month. And then at some point I start to wind down on that project and I'm not putting in as much time. And we agree that that billing amount is going to go down. But then the next month, the intercompany transaction comes through and it's still the original amount, right? Now, did the manager who was supposed to correct that entry and cut it in half because I'm putting less time to it, did they do something malicious? Were they trying to steal money from that other organization, that other entity, that other cost center? No, they probably just didn't get to it. And so what we can do in terms of using smart contracts and the way we set up these rules is we're able to ensure that we get things right at inception, that we really have process integrity based on those rules, and everything is transparent and visible to everybody else, which takes us into our next column. This idea that why does corporate need to be the central point of authority for two businesses to have to come to? So if business A submits a transaction and business B says that's no good, why do they have to mediate that through corporate? Right. So as we look at transparency of everybody sees everything plus no intermediaries, these things run faster and at a lower cost if you get to interact with each other directly. Corporate's just another participant, right? Treasury is just observing this activity and they're being queued up to settle cash exchange at the end of the month or whatever the period is when they choose to do a cash settlement. Okay, and lastly was automation. Again, these real-time reconciliations. Today, reconciliations are done. It's a time-consuming process. People on one side of the transaction upload what they believe is the record and the truth. Other side uploads theirs, and then it has to be reconciled. And if it's incorrect, everybody has to go back and try to figure out what went wrong. So being able to have this real-time reconciliation, we eliminate a lot of those errors. We have continuous visibility into the positions where we are. And some of the things that we didn't explore in this proof of concept, but that I put forth as potential down the road, is integrating additional emerging technologies like machine learning and AI to evaluate currency translation rates and advise and send notifications when it's an optimal time to do those cash settlements. So beyond just doing them at a scheduled, well, let's just do them on the 15th of the month, because that's how we always do it. Maybe we get updates throughout the month that tell us when's a better time to look to maybe do that settlement. Okay, so looking at different blockchain models as we start to move the conversation in the direction of Hyperledger, when I talk to different people about this, we want to be very clear. We're talking about enterprise blockchain, right? We're not talking about permissionless, anonymous public blockchains. We're not talking about cryptocurrency, right? This is not about Bitcoin. And to clarify further on the cryptocurrency, we did not look at in this use case making a token for the intercompany transactions. You could potentially look at converting all the different currency amounts to a personalized token like a GE token or a GE coin. We've had abstract conversations and brainstorming sessions about that, but that's not where we were going with this at this time. This was more just about a distributed ledger and being able to do the reconciliations in the currencies that they're in today. Again, future use, potentially you could look at integrating your own crypto coin or token as a way of also doing the reconciliations and settlements. Okay, so again, we're in this bucket over here of consortium federated. Users are known. We have permission for who can do what. We use a voting multi-party consensus, right? We're not using any kind of proof of work consensus or anything like that. It would be way too slow for our volume. So using kind of the Kafka and Raft type of consensus mechanisms that you find in Hyperledger, lighter, faster, that was more in line with what we were looking at. So looking at Hyperledger, what is Hyperledger Fabric? Again, if you're on this call, I think you probably have a pretty decent idea. Hopefully you do. Obviously, this is an open source blockchain platform from the Linux Foundation. It started early on, I believe, with IBM and some other players that came in. The code was handed off to Linux Foundation to be maintained and built upon to run the consortium. Again, down at the bottom, no cryptocurrency required, right? Modular architecture, which is very important for some of the different pieces that we're going to be talking about. Channels, private data collections, very useful for, again, the type of work we're doing, because if I have 4 or 5 different companies, company A and company B are doing transactions, company C doesn't really need to be privy to that or tied up in that. So channels are a very effective way of being able to segment that work and segregate it. Okay, so lots of different abilities here that we thought Hyperledger Fabric was really the right solution for us. Obviously, there are other ones to consider. The other two main ones that we kind of tossed some ideas around were Ethereum and Quorum. Wait, no, not Quorum. Corda. Corda, I think that was it. So Ethereum was the other main one, though. But ultimately, Hyperledger Fabric really fit in with what we wanted to do. The ability to do smart contracts, chain codes, right? This really comes down. My career is built in financial systems, so to me, smart contracts are very straightforward. These are business rules, right? And in different systems, we always have different business rules that govern how transactions can take place. But really, what's great about smart contracts is the way that the different parties, that the smart contract is committed to the blockchain. So everybody knows, and when changes are made to it, they have to be agreed upon. And again, there's a lot of transparency and visibility to that. And so this is what we call the foundation of algorithmic trust. So we thought that that was very, very valuable. Here's a look at what we did in our smart contract. We basically had about 7 different functions that were created in there that ran these different processes for PO submission and validation, receipt submission, invoice submission, our 2- and 3-way matching, intercompany agreements, real-time netting and settlement, and the dispute handling. And you could see here's kind of a flow diagram, how the smart contract worked. And if they passed, it went on to the next step, or if it failed, it went off to a different step. And what we would do is we would track using status codes on the smart contract, on the transaction, status codes that always let us know where that transaction was in the process so that the smart contract could take action against it based on that status code. Okay. Now I'm going to get into here a little bit about Oracle, and this presentation does dig in quite deep on Oracle. The important thing to recognize is that it didn't necessarily have to be Oracle, or there are components, when I get to the full architecture, there are components that can be swapped out and not necessarily have to be Oracle. In this case, we had spoken to a few different providers. We do some work with Azure. GE actually does a decent amount of blockchain work with Azure. We talked to AWS, but the ERPs, the primary ERPs that we use are Oracle ERPs. And so we started a deep conversation with them because a lot of our financial systems are Oracle. And what I really liked about them was that they brought a complete wing-to-wing solution to the table. So when we talked about it, we said, okay, fine, we have blockchain, we have Hyperledger Fabric, so you have blockchain as a service. Great. What about the data integration? And they said, oh, well, we have our Oracle Integration Cloud, and that ties directly into your ERPs and into the blockchain. We said, okay, that's a big value add. And when we talked about the rich history database for analytics, and I'm going to dig into all of that a little bit more. So I want to kind of preface this with saying, yes, there's a decent amount here about Oracle because that was our implementation partner, the vendor of choice. We also worked with Deloitte as our consulting partner. But again, this is a Hyperledger meeting. The Hyperledger components are true to Hyperledger, and we'll talk about where Oracle adds value and where you could also use another vendor. So the key kind of things that Oracle adds out of the box, which made it very easy, is it's completely a blockchain as a service, so it runs in their cloud. They do offer the ability to install it in your own data center, kind of their enterprise blockchain on premise, but we use the cloud version. They set up all the REST proxies right off the bat. They have a ledger database replaced with the Berkeley database, and so what this does is instead of using a basic main database that comes with Hyperledger, the Berkeley database supports SQL queries as well, so you can use actual SQL in your smart contracts. So that helps a little bit with the skill set for your smart contract developers. They don't have to do as much in Couch database language. The rich history database, which I'm going to get into a little bit more in some other slides, because this was a huge value add for us, and really to kind of give you the 20,000 foot view on that, and then we'll dig in a little deeper, is what they've done is, if you think about the transactions on a blockchain, that's a transactional based system. So now if I want to go run a report, those queries against the blockchain are expensive in terms of transaction time and process, especially if I say something like, show me the last 12 months of activity, or how I got to this current state balance, right? If I have to go and dig through the blockchain and recursively work my way back to come up with those numbers, that's going to be very poor performance. So what we want to do is we want to take that blockchain data and move it into a data warehouse so that we can report off of it. And what Oracle has done is they created a data pump that's built directly into their product that streams the data in real time into an autonomous data warehouse in the Oracle Cloud. And then from there, we're able to take an analytics tool like Oracle Analytics, or you could swap that out with Tableau or Power BI, and you could put that on top of that database to then do your reporting. And originally, I did question, one thing I questioned about that was, I said, you know, the big value add with the blockchain, or a big part of the value add, is the immutability and the guarantee that the data can't be tampered with. Once I move the data into a reporting environment, I kind of diminish that a little bit. Now, that's no different than an ERP, where we also move our transactions into reporting environments and potentially they could be changed. But I was very adamant about the fact that if I go out there and say, hey, this is blockchain, it's completely immutable, and then a report is incorrect, you know, people aren't going to want to hear the technical, well, it's technically in the data warehouse. Anyway, Oracle has since solved that problem with blockchain tables in their database, which basically do hashing of the previous row. So it's a read-only database or a write-only database that you can't make changes to, and it hashes the previous row. So this can really give you the integrity between what's on the chain and what's in the reporting warehouse. And then security, they also provide the security with their identity management, authentication, and different access controllers capabilities. So a lot of this we could do ourselves. I could go out to Hyperledger's site and download the code, and I could start spinning up Docker containers. I've done it, you know, it's certainly a hassle, and nowhere near as fast as I was able to create the network for this POC in about 15, 20 minutes on the Oracle Cloud. So that was a big value add to keep things moving along. So here's the total architecture. And you can see that this, again, is all based on Oracle Cloud. There's the identity management analytics cloud, where we do the dashboards and the reporting. The database as a service, the autonomous data warehouse, which gets the data from the blockchain streamed to it. There is the actual blockchain platform, which runs Hyperledger Fabric, but on the Oracle Cloud, and pre-built, where you can deploy all your peer organizations and smart contracts, everything through their cloud interface. And you can also do it from a command line. They do have command line REST calls that you can deploy things, so you don't have to use the UI. There's the integration cloud, which is how we connected to the ERPs. We tested against some ERPs that were running in a cloud SaaS, others that were on premise. We also tested against SAP, and we kind of figured out how to do all that. We did data validations and data enrichment, and we created a front end app. Okay, so there's the front end app, and I'll give you a better view of that after the fact. So this is kind of how we looked at the solution integration with the different products, right? So if you look kind of on the right, you see the technology stack that Oracle provides, right? The different tools. And on the left is kind of tied back to that capabilities model, right? How do we go ahead and look at those different capabilities and map them to the different products? And this is a case where, again, you could come in and you could swap something out. So I have the accounting, data ingestion, and the enrichment and validation, and the exception management. That's all going through their integration cloud product. And in that integration cloud product, they have a tool called process management. And that's how we set up the dispute management. So someone could, in theory, submit a transaction that meets the smart contract. It goes through. It comes from, the first ERP, it goes through the distributed ledger, it validates, it gets posted in the counterparty's ERP, and then it automatically gets posted back the conclusion of that transaction in the first party's ERP. Now, the second party may come along after the fact and go, actually, it turns out, that product was defective, right? So everything met the rules that it was supposed to, but now I want to dispute it. So we created an interface through the web UI where someone could go in, they could find that transaction, and they could issue a dispute on it. This would then kind of shell out to a process management workflow, and it would change the status on the blockchain. And the great thing is all of this is being tracked. So anyone who goes back, a lot of times when we hear about blockchain use cases and you hear the word provenance, right? And we hear about this especially in supply chain and in terms of responsible, mining practices and the ability to kind of bring things into the supply chain, the raw materials, and we hear about the provenance, right? And that's a big deal. To me, as a financial systems professional, I have an equally, I have an equal need and requirement for provenance of a financial transaction. I need to know, where did that transaction originate, when, by who, and all the different things that have touched and impacted that transaction through its lifetime. So we look at that as transactional provenance. And so these disputes, the way they get captured on the blockchain, was really quite powerful and really a good use case for that type of capability. There's a document management piece, which we use content and experience. Sometimes another thing that we have in exception management is sometimes you have what are called document holds. So let's say you're doing business in a restricted country. You may have to provide a number of forms before that transaction can be settled. So we can shell out by knowing some of the data that we get in that enrichment and validation step. We ping our master data system and we could find out information about the legal entities that are participating in this transaction. And if we find out that the legal entity is actually in a jurisdiction that requires different paperwork, we can hold that transaction until and shell it out to this workflow and wait until those documents are collected. Then we also append the documents into the transaction. So that becomes hash. So if anyone changes the documents later, you're going to know that the transactions have been tampered with. So the distributed ledger piece, obviously Oracle blockchain, the data warehouse, the ADW, analytics. And again, any of these pieces could be swapped out if you say, well, I really have a big, a Looker shop, right? We use Google Looker for analytics. Okay, so swap that piece out. And then the custom UI, we built, an Angular front end, and we were able to put that together for the end users. So looking at the analytics piece, what you start to see here is the ability to take that blockchain information, that blockchain data, and turn it into information, right? And so you can start to see different things here: total number of invoices amount, who was the initiator of the transaction in terms of different businesses, and other key metrics. You have an executive summary here. One of the things that I will point out, because obviously I do like the Oracle products. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone down that road with them. One thing that's particularly interesting in this case is that executive summary. Nobody wrote that. Okay, that was written by an AI engine that's built into Oracle Analytics Cloud. So it actually looks at the data and it generates a natural language text output. And if you change any of the elements on the report, or if you filter or anything, that executive summary will automatically update based on the data that is now available in the view. So that's very powerful and something that we really liked. Going now to the next slide here, I talked about transactional provenance, right? So here's a view where you can see on all of these different, and this is effectively a way to visualize the actual blockchain. So when we talk to people about blockchain and we show them kind of these different steps within the transaction that all build on each other, and you can see where a transaction may have gone into a hold status. You can see how long it was in a hold status, when it came out of that hold status, and why did the status go. So every time a status code changes, you effectively get another entry on this visualization. And this is pretty much near real time because it's streaming directly into the data warehouse, which is then presenting itself in these visualizations. So throughout our close periods, the business functional users can go in. If you're a counterparty, you can go in and you can see what's holding up the transaction, and you're able to really kind of see things that today are very hard to dig out of the existing system. Okay. So this is just kind of I don't have a demo. I do have a demo, but I wasn't going to show it. It takes too long. This is just kind of a GIF of kind of the user going through the front end, just to kind of give you an idea of what the UI ultimately looked like and how a user would interact with the data and be able to go in and kind of do some different filtering or do some different processing, execute a dispute, export data out to a CSV file is what you just saw there. So this we were very happy with this. This came out really nice. Okay, so architecture summary. Ideal solution is built on a collection of pre-integrated Oracle Cloud Platform services, right? So we talked about all those different pieces. Another thing that I'll throw in, a couple of key points that we didn't talk about. Why else is blockchain really effective for this solution and useful? One of the things is built-in resiliency, right? And when we talk about the way a peer-to-peer network operates, today I have a centralized environment. If that centralized environment goes down, everybody is on hold until that centralized environment comes back up. In a peer-to-peer situation where I have multiple participating nodes throughout the organization, if one of those nodes go down, the other nodes continue to transact, and when that node comes back up, it catches up. Now, in this use case, in the proof of concept, we only used Oracle, right? Right before the pandemic hit, we were actually in the process of spinning up peer nodes in Azure to connect into this blockchain and become part of this consortium, because we wanted to prove that we could go cross-vendor, right? That wouldn't be as much of an issue for GE. You could argue that maybe one of my business units would say, hey, I really don't want to use Oracle. I want to use, AWS or Azure. That's less likely when you're dealing in an intercompany situation, but it is absolutely a requirement if you're going to be dealing with other companies. Right, you can't be in healthcare services and go out to all the hospitals and say, we got this great blockchain solution, we want you all to use it. By the way, you all have to use Oracle. They're going to say, oh, I'm an AWS shop, I'm an IBM shop, I'm Azure. I don't trust any of this cloud stuff. I only want to download Hyperledger into my own data center. You're going to have to deal with different things. So that's certainly a key component that needs to be dealt with. And different cloud providers are at different levels of maturity with being able to do that. We found Oracle and Microsoft were in pretty good positions. Unfortunately, COVID hit and other priorities kind of came to the head of the queue, and proving that out was not as important at the moment. So hopefully I'll get back to that at some point. I would like to prove out that I can connect Oracle and Microsoft and prove that end to end. But that resiliency of being able to spread it across multiple clouds, across multiple nodes, is definitely a big piece of why we think blockchain could be a good solution for this. Ultimately, we think that the way the architecture was set up, we would be able to expand on it and grow it and build it out to, like I said earlier on, I was talking about maybe introducing AI or machine learning into it. So I think that you would be able to get some of those additional components in there, because we did kind of take a microservices approach to it. So for the most part, I'm kind of wrapping up here, and I'm done with this part, and we'll be able to go into some Q&As, and then of course we're going to hear from Robert, and then we can do some more Q&A at the end. But overall, I will leave you with, because I'm sure it would come up as a question, where are we now, right? What did we do? And so basically where we are at the moment is we're in a bit of a hold pattern. The proof of concept from a technology standpoint, we believe was very successful. We proved our use case, and we definitely feel that we proved that this is a good technology and cost effective too. I'm not going to get into cost and talking about all of that now, but it was much more cost effective than I thought it would have been when I first kind of dreamed up this idea and said, okay, well, can we even do this? And I expected it to be more than it was from a cost perspective. So technology wise, we felt we were there and we were ready to go to the next step to start doing implementation. Unfortunately, what we learned, and this is one of the big takeaways that I'll impart on many of you to consider, is that these projects are much less about the technology than they are the process change. In order to get the value out of what we're trying to do here, the business is going to have to change the way they do things. Okay, so when I talk about right at inception, that if you have a 25-year-old system that currently does not enforce that things perfectly reconcile on submission, okay, that's a big disruption to the process flow. You can argue it's the right change and it's one that we have to make, but that requires the business, the functional users, to revamp the way they do things. And functional doesn't often move as fast as technology can. So we're kind of in a holding pattern at the moment. The decision was made to go with option 3 for this fiscal year, is to re-platform the mainframe in the cloud on an emulator so we could get that hardware cost out. So that was a short-term gain, a kind of a quick win. And we have the blockchain solution on the back burner. We're hoping as we go into 21 that we would pick that back up. COVID, of course, has disrupted things even a little bit further. So now I'm a little unsure of when exactly will be the right time to pick that back up. But ultimately, it's going to be decided by the business and not the technology. The technology is what it is, and it's not that hard to implement. So it's really about the business having to recognize, what does it mean if we change our processes, and what are we going to have to do to accomplish that? So I think, if anything, that was one of the big lessons learned, is you really have to know that you have commitment from the business community to make the changes that are going to need to be made to take advantage of this. And so I'm hopeful and optimistic that we will continue down this road, and we can apply these learnings also to some other use cases that we're looking at. But that's where we are at the moment, is the proof of concept is just that. It was a successful POC. We have not moved to production at this time. And so with that, we can do Q&A now, or I don't know, Robert, if you're going to go first, and then we could do Q&A after. Here's some helpful links. I assume this presentation will be available to everybody if you want to look at some of the different things here. Down at the bottom, I have a blog where I dive deep technically into, it's a 3-part series on how we did this proof of concept, where I dive in very deep into how to build the network out on the Oracle Cloud, how to do the integrations, how to do the analytics. So there's a lot of stuff there if you're interested in looking at it. And with that, I'm going to end, and I'm going to hand it over to Robert.
Thanks, Gary. That was great. We do have a couple questions here in the chat that maybe we can address before Robert goes. So,
Sure.
Number 1, I know you mentioned that one of the drivers for going to a blockchain-based solution was the potential cost savings. Do you have an idea about the expected cost savings of implementing this blockchain-based intercompany payment solution? And what would be the main driver of those cost savings?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a loaded question that's very easy for me to answer right now, because I'm coming from a 25-year-old mainframe, right? I had nowhere to go but down. I could have pretty much implemented anything and the cost would have gone down, because mainframes are unbelievably expensive. And so no matter what solution we picked, we would save money. I think the better comparison is that I did look at it in terms of other vendors. where we looked at implementing a third-party vendor SaaS solution that is built specifically for blockchain, and they were on order of magnitude of about 5 times the cost of what it would have taken for us to do it in blockchain. So when I look at, here's what it would cost me to do it in the blockchain solution, it would have cost me 5 times more to do it with the SaaS solution. So like I said, anything is going to be less than mainframe. And so it was going to be a significant cost savings. And I felt that the amount that we were going to be looking at was definitely fair. And anyone I told the price to, that immediately was kind of off the table. Like they were like, oh, okay, let's talk about other stuff then. Like it was kind of like, if that's what it's going to cost, then okay, that's good. Let's talk about other things.
Got it. And the other question we have here is, how is GE solving the many-to-many relationship needs of the suppliers lower in the supply chain?
Okay, so that's not part of this solution, right? So this is an intercompany solution, so it doesn't deal with the suppliers. We have had conversations about, could we expand this if we were to do this? Could we then expand it out to suppliers? And the first kind of thought there was, well, okay, let's talk about our strategic partners first, right? Maybe we could bring in 1 or 2 strategic partners, put them on the blockchain. We also thought about mergers and acquisitions. That blockchain is excellent. A distributed ledger is excellent technology for mergers and acquisitions. A lot of times when you spin off companies, you have transition service agreements, right? TSAs, where you have to let that company continue to operate on your platform for a period of time as they migrate off. So the ability to kind of segregate through channels and kind of separate the way the work is kind of commingled, and have that security built in, but in a very easy way to segment people out, we thought would be really useful. So I don't have a great answer for you on suppliers because we didn't really dig into that. We really focused on just the internal companies within GE. Got it.
Well, if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them at the end of the meetup. But for the time being, Robert, please feel free to go ahead and give us your experiences.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gary. That was very interesting. If you could stop sharing your screen.
That's what I'm looking for, my meeting controls here. I seem to have lost them. Let's see. I can't find. You can't take control of it unless I let it go. Let me see.
Nope.
All right. So let's try this. Stop video. I don't have. Oh, there we go. I found it. Okay.
There we go. That did it.
There we go. That did it. It stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Perfect. And can everybody see the screen perfectly now?
Yes, I can see it.
Maybe go full screen.
I can't, right. I can see your browser tabs also. Yeah. It's full screen, but we can see your browser tabs.
Oh, well, I'll do this. That doesn't work. Okay. There we go.
It's not the end of the world, but if you want to open it up in another browser window that just has a single tab, that might be a little cleaner.
There we go.
That works.
Perfect. Oh. All right. You can see everything fine now?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. So thanks, Gary, and thanks everybody for attending. I've seen some familiar names in the chat, so that's always good to see, or in the attendance list at least. So thanks for that, Gary, and I'll continue the conversation talking about some of the common hurdles that IntellectEU has been able to overcome in our road to enterprise blockchain adoption. So a little bit about IntellectEU to start off with. So we've had our blockchain practice for about 6 years now. Before that, we were mainly focused on financial messaging, and our company was incepted in 2006. So we've been here for about 14 years. We've done over 400 fintech projects, are active in over 30 countries globally, and our total team is about a little over 170 people strong. So looking at where we've kind of come from, our main focus has been traditionally on the financial services and telecommunications sectors. In 2007, we started our relationship with Swift, where we're now their largest global services partner. We're also a founding member of the Linux Foundation's Hyperledger project, and our strategic partner of R3 Digital Asset and VMware. You can see most of the organizations lined up here are DLT related. Our main organizations that we're working with, our main clients are financial institutions, so investment banks, retail banks, stock exchanges, central banks. And our blockchain team itself is about a little over 60 now, should have updated that, team members strong. And we're also venturing in, as you mentioned, something interesting about AI, Gary, and we're also looking into broadening our AI expertise and even our quantum computing expertise. We recently hired a PhD in quantum computing, and I've been having the pleasure of learning more about that, which is really interesting. So the things I wanted to cover today here, I'll start off talking a little bit about the early days of distributed ledger technology, both globally and from an IntellectEU perspective. So the times that were characterized mostly by research and development, some proof of value, some proof of concepts, experimenting with the technology really kind of in a void, not taking into account any of the non-functional requirements, but really looking at what the technologies can do. And then a little bit more about the uncharted waters that we've treaded at the start there. Following that is a little bit of information about how we've tackled scaling solutions and how we've experienced the growing adoption of blockchain technology worldwide. After which I'll talk a little bit about building a production-ready solution, some of the DevOps challenges that come with that, how there's different use cases and different approaches connected to those, and a little bit about the IT infrastructure as well. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about our Catalyst blockchain platform, which is as Chris mentioned, our blockchain platform as a service that we launched earlier this year in the summer. So starting off with the early days. For IntellectEU, this was around 2016, 2017. Our blockchain team in those years grew from its inception to about 10 team members strong. And this is really a period where we were all encouraged to really experiment with the different technologies. We did some playing around with Ripple, with Ethereum, but mainly focused on Hyperledger Fabric, at the time 0.6, as well as Corda. We did a lot of internal proof of concepts, proof of values, and we also did a few external ones. Amongst them is a trade matching and reconciliation proof of concept we did for Telindus, an IT firm in Belgium. We did a KYC data synchronization and consolidation project for KBC US. And then we also did a central bank digital currency proof of concept for a central bank and a stock exchange. So really this period, 2016, 2017, was really characterized by getting to know the technology, really going into the code, figuring out how it works. How does it work to write smart contracts in Go? How do you deploy business logic in a decentralized environment? What does it mean to have a public blockchain versus a private blockchain? What are the consensus mechanisms out there? These were all kind of questions that we started tackling. And then looking at the global perspective in 2016, 2017, you can see here, I added a graph from Google Trends, and you could say it might have been the Bitcoin price as well, but it isn't. I left that out to not spark any frustration or discussion. But these were really the years of the DLT hype train. Every organization that had heard about it wanted to jump on the hype train. It was the year of the crypto bubble, but with this significant amount of hype also comes some skepticism. And one of my friends who works at a financial institution here in Belgium keeps saying that I work for an organization that promotes the solution looking for a problem. I beg to differ, but it's something that has been said a lot back in late 2016 and 2017 as well. So I mentioned organizations were really focusing on experimenting with the technology. We're looking at the deep technological aspects, for example, of Hyperledger Fabric, and not so much about all the different non-functional requirements. Looking at scalability wasn't really a thing back then. Same for security, reliability, integration, deployability, interoperability, the different governance frameworks, legal frameworks, privacy. People weren't really paying a ton of attention on that through the lens of distributed ledger technology. And then to come back to something that Gary said as well, it was back in that day or that year that the focus was really technology driven and not as much business or use case driven, which led to some misalignment between the business area and their expectations versus the technology itself, which then in turn led to quite slow adoption because, of course, distributed ledger technology often built on a consortium of organizations. And so if there's some misalignment between business expectations and technology, of course, your consortium building is on a very, very slow pace. So moving on to the second section, scaling solutions, growing adoption of blockchain technology. What happened there? For IntellectEU, this was 2017, 2018. Our team grew from around 10 to around 25 people strong. We were focusing mostly on Hyperledger Fabric 1.0 and 1.4. On Corda, we continued some research and development. And then, of course, we started looking into the digital asset modeling language as well. Now, something that was quite important from our perspective, really, in these years was the increased adoption of virtualization and containerization, which were really crucial in the further adoption of blockchain technology itself. As I mentioned in that first phase, it was really characterized by technology focused, where in those years, organizations really realized, okay, they started learning about the technology. Now we're looking at the businesses. Now we're looking at the use cases. How can we actually leverage this technology, and which use cases make sense to leverage DLT? This kind of resulted in more and more interested people and organizations, which led to more organizations working with distributed ledger technology, more funding around the technology, and it kind of created this upward spiral regarding the adoption of distributed ledger technology. Since organizations figured out more or less what the technology was and what it could do, organizations started looking a little bit more into the non-functional requirements, which led to a situation where they went from the why to the how, but the how was filled in very differently in different organizations, different countries, which significantly increased the complexity of these non-functional requirements, of that scalability, that interoperability, that privacy. And from our perspective at IntellectEU, we really spent a lot of time with knowledge sharing. So with potential clients, we did a lot of workshops, we did a lot of trainings, really teaching these organizations what DLT could do and which are some of the use cases that DLT could be leveraged for, and which use cases you didn't want to use distributed ledger technology for. So this is the year where we really shifted from being a traditional technology organization to really tackling those different methodologies, those processes, giving us quite an advantage over some of the other technology firms. Now, building a production-ready solution. So I'll talk a little bit about the DevOps, the IT infrastructure, and the different use cases and approaches. So for IntellectEU, this was around 2018 till where we are today, 2020. Our team has over 60 people now. We're working with Hyperledger Fabric 2.3. We're working with Corda, with the digital asset modeling language, and of course our Catalyst blockchain platform that we launched this summer. So again, another shift in the industry. We went from a technology focus to a business and use case focus to what is now a more holistic approach, where yes, we're looking at the technology, and yes, we're looking at the business, but we are also really looking at the IT infrastructure now. You're not just developing a proof of concept that's a standalone application. You're building an application that has to be integrated with legacy systems, that has to be scalable towards the future, that has to be deliver a competitive pricing versus the competing solutions that you might want to put in place. As per Gary's comment, you were working with a mainframe. Of course, the only way is down in terms of costs, and these are the things that we're looking at in these years. You can see that there was collaboration at the center of building solutions like these, and I think this is perfect segue to give a little shout out to the Hyperledger community, where the community that you've built and the ecosystem around that have really been the cornerstone of blockchain adoption, especially for Hyperledger greenhouse products. Some of the other trends that we've seen in the last few years, especially now with the pandemic, is the central bank digital currency hype, or trend, I should call it. We've seen a lot of collaboration between public-private sector on a variety of proof of concepts, research projects, working groups, and actual project implementations as well. And then lastly, we've also seen some new marketplaces in the financial industry focused on insurance, reinsurance, and really combining that with distributed ledger technology and multi-party smart contracts. Looking at some of the projects that we have built in the last few years and really comparing them. So we've come to the conclusion that the use case often dictates the approach you want to take to building a DLT application or solution. I've highlighted two of the solutions that we've built for clients here today. One of them is Circlo. So Circlo is a platform that we've built for a bank. We've developed it end to end, and it's a platform that allows local governments to distribute vouchers to the local population, which can then be spent locally at shops and merchants. So obviously, digital vouchers versus physical vouchers in today's day and age with the global pandemic is 100% the preferred choice. And then you, of course, have the use case of being able to support your local economy in times where it's well needed as well. So this has been a project we've done the end-to-end development for in, I think it was less than half a year. Seeing how there's still clients being onboarded today. I think a couple weeks ago, I'm living in Belgium here, and a couple weeks ago, the local region of Wallonia was onboarded as a client to the platform, and they committed over 1.6 million euros to be spent in vouchers. So that's great to see that there are still clients being onboarded. And if we're comparing this to a widely different use case, a widely different project that we're working on today, which is Cube, the KYC utility for banks and enterprises, KYC standing for Know Your Customer Information, which here we've developed a platform in collaboration with a market infrastructure in Belgium and 4 banks, which looks more like a real consortium. And let me tell you, that comes with its own set of challenges. There's a lot of compliance that we have to take into account and existing flows at each of the bank sites, which has required us to take a completely different approach. And we're releasing, or we have released the V1 of this earlier this year. And we've also done the end-to-end development there. So looking at the use case and how each use case kind of dictates a different approach is something we've noticed as well. Now, how do the hurdles, and I'll highlight some of the hurdles more in detail as well, and how do they detail into or how do they translate into some of the solutions that we've identified to tackle these in the form of Catalyst blockchain platform. So I'll give a little bit of an overview there. We started with some of the challenges. So as our developers have been building blockchain applications for the last few years now, they always ran into some of the same challenges they had. So setting up a blockchain network, Gary, you mentioned you managed to set up a simple blockchain network in 15, 20 minutes. That's something that a few years ago was unheard of. Traditionally, that is a very lengthy and manual process, includes a lot of manual scripting and a high level of expertise. While today, there are solutions, and Catalyst blockchain platform is one of them, where that is no longer the case. Another challenge, maintenance. Okay, so now you've set up your network, you've got your application running. Now you need to maintain everything. So maintaining that uptime of the network requires a high amount of time, or used to require a high amount of time and resources from the DevOps teams. And again, is characterized by a lot of manual scripting, reactive processes. And then lastly, the management itself of your network and your organizations in your network. Still, oftentimes this happens in sort of a centralized way with a network operator or network administrator. And there's few options available for this to be done on chain, fully decentralized. Now, this is really where Catalyst blockchain platform comes into play, with the setup being quick and automated through our user interface, which has abstracted away a lot of the highly technical aspects. And again, we tend to say a 10 organization network in 10 minutes. So fairly similar to what you mentioned, Gary. And then for the monitoring as well, for the maintenance as well, we have monitoring, auto recovery, auto failover mechanisms that really allow your blockchain developers to stop spending time maintaining existing networks, but really spend their time building value-adding applications. So I think that's pretty powerful to see, where your DevOps used to spend a lot of time maintaining existing networks. Now that's not necessary anymore. And then lastly, related to the management of your network, Catalyst blockchain platform allows for that fully decentralized on-chain governance, where you really can have that end-to-end platform to manage your network, your policy configurations, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at the main features and how these features tackle some of the hurdles that we've come about in the last few years, that unified management and operations console that abstracts away those highly technical aspects, right? You don't have to manually script anymore to set up a new node, or to add an organization to a specific channel, or to upload your chain code. This is all possible just in a few clicks through the interface. So again, a lot less time necessary to perform these actions. Secondly, the cloud agnostic and multi-location deployment. Gary, you made a great point earlier, talking about how each large organization might have their own shop, whether it's Azure or on-prem or AWS, you name it, Oracle. And this is really a vision that we adhere to as well. We want to make sure that each organization can use the cloud services provider that they want to, or even have a hybrid setup or an on-premises setup without that cloud vendor lock-in. Because if everyone on the network has their nodes running in the same Azure, then are you really still running a decentralized network? And so we've made that possible. And then similarly also with the deployment in multiple availability zones and over multiple clusters for increased reliability. Then security. We have our HSM supported, as well as HashiCorp Vault and Kubernetes secrets to control your security materials and digital identities. User management, pretty straightforward. Monitoring and alerting dashboard. So here we've created a set, we've created a dashboard where you can manually configure your monitoring and alerting. There's failover mechanisms, I mentioned that earlier. And as well, there's a possibility to integrate the system with your existing monitoring tools as well. And then lastly, our enterprise-grade support. So I think Hyperledger Fabric is this great framework that allows you to build your blockchain networks. And we've taken that and really built around that an enterprise-grade system, including the support so that you can reduce your operational expenses, having to look for these highly technical profiles to support your network, your applications that you might have running. So some of the screens, I added some screens of our product to just give you a bit of an idea of what it looks like. So on the left-hand side, you can see this is from the perspective of one organization. In this example, it's called Bank One. You can see on the left-hand side in the top, there's the dashboard with the Go metrics, ledger metrics, all metrics that you require, and also events and logging is available there. So this can, as I mentioned earlier, this can be integrated with your existing monitoring tools. And then at the bottom, you have your network participants. So these are your own MSPs and your partners' MSPs, and you can just add your partner's MSPs by uploading the JSON file. And then you can see here that we have selected the orderers. So you can see here that Bank One has 3 orderers. You can all click these for additional details if you want to access your orderers details. Then secondly, there's the peers here, where we've developed the functionality of being able to create your own peer sets, which are template configurations for your peer nodes. And you can see here all the actions that you can perform related to your peer. So you can remove it, you can join it to a channel, you can install chain code. You can see at the bottom the channels that your peer is connected to. On the right hand side, you can then go to your chain code and perform the activities related to that there. And then there is the channels that we've highlighted here. So you can see, you can add organizations to a specific channel. You can update your anchor peer. You can instantiate your chain code. You can add another peer. And these used to all be highly manually scripted activities that are now just possible within a few clicks. And again, you can see the details. You can see in the middle, there's proposals. So this is part of our decentralized voting system, where if you want to add a certain organization to a channel, you can initiate a proposal. And then on the left under data sharing, you can see the policy. So for this, the policy is all, meaning that all the existing organizations that are part of the channel have to vote yes to the proposal in order for that new organization to be added to the channel, as for example. So that's about it from my side. Thank everyone. Looking forward to any questions. If you'd like any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I guess Chris, we can jump into the QA.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. That was great, and thanks again, Gary, for your insights as well. So we have one question in the chat right now from Mulshankar. Mulshankar, I don't know if you want to if I want to unmute you right now, and you can ask it yourself, as we have Gary and Robert here. Let's see if I can unmute.
Well, I read it. It's a long question.
It is. That's why I was wondering if you just wanted to ask.
Does everybody see it? I mean, I think there's some great talking points there. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about this last question. I wanted to explain because I was writing, so I want to just actually I'm also a blockchain solution architect, and these are the questions are asked by the people in the community as well.
Absolutely.
Like you show, you have shown us the architect that blockchain enterprise solution. So blockchain is, they see only the part of the solution. I mean, it means, and mostly people say that it's blockchain is only 10% of the solution. And if we if we say that, if we show some guy actually people are still confused with the blockchain. They are still denying mode, and now things are changing bit, but still, and they say that if you say that there is no intermediary, then if only 10% are on the blockchain, still you are using the centralized system. So
Right.
you can say that bitcoins are other cryptocurrencies are no intermediary, but these type of solution we can't say no intermediary. And other
Right.
things I would say, they say that blockchain is not is a feature we can use rather than
Right.
we can say the blockchain solution. So
Yeah.
thank you. If your views on this, both of you.
Sure, absolutely. So I think you're spot on in what you're saying in terms of it being a part of the solution in terms of an enterprise architecture, right? And I was very clear to our functional users, we have ERP systems. We're not replacing the ERP. And we were very much adamant about the fact that use the right tool for what your needs are. And so we have these complicated enterprise resource and planning systems, general ledgers with all these rules and processes built in. We weren't looking to change any of that. And that's still the source of record for the particular entity. But what we wanted to do was be able to extend that ledger to be able to interact better with other ledgers using a DLT. So I do think it is just a piece of the solution. It is certainly not meant to replace those solutions. But if you think about today, I run a report and then I take that CSV file and I SFTP it over to the other party for them to upload into their system. Those are the kind of transactional changes that we're trying to improve upon and say we can do this better in a more transparent way. And as far as the intermediaries, we definitely struggled in some of our brainstorming sessions around how the blockchain philosophy and what it means to be decentralized. And we started going down a rabbit hole where we were like, well, we created a UI. Technically, that's a centralized component, because if the UI goes down, then it doesn't matter that your data tier that the blockchain is on is distributed because the UI is down. So then we started to extrapolate on that. We said, well, technically we could let the business build their own UIs and tie into our APIs. So you do have to come to a point where you say, what's decentralized and what am I willing to accept as being a common use layer in the solution? And I think for everybody that's going to be different depending on their circumstances. And so, the last part I'll leave off with that is that one of the other things
Did we lose him?
Yeah, I think we lost Gary.
stop you.
Oh. Okay, well, apologies for that. We'll see if he comes back in, if it was just a network issue. Robert, I don't know if you've anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in here quickly. I see. Oh, Gary, you're back, but you're muted.
Sorry about that. I seem to have a little bit of a problem. I think a wire got moved and all of a sudden things dropped. So I'll wrap up there. But yeah, again, telling people about blockchain actually became a detriment to our project, because it just became this focal point of this new technology that maybe people didn't fully understand. They've heard some things about Bitcoin. Maybe they were a little nervous. And so again, I mean, it's really just a different piece of a data tier for transactional storage. So it's maybe not something that needs to really be the focal point of your conversations.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, and same with saying that blockchain is just part of a solution. What it does do though is that it introduces a whole set of new possible business models, new possible governance models, and just as you mentioned, Gary, it introduced for GE, it introduced a new set of working with the invoices, or at least adding your the information right from inception, which in fact is just a new process. It's a process change. So I think, yes, blockchain does introduce a whole set of new possibilities through business models, through governance models. It opens up so many possibilities, but it is still part of a solution.
Agreed,
you.
agreed. So we have another question here from Sanjeev, the long one. Sanjeev, I don't know if you want to come on and ask as well. If not, I can go ahead. There he is.
No, it's okay. A small introduction. Around 2017, end of 2017-18, me being an infrastructure individual, it was interesting thing that we made an polling stuff. We thought that in the current scenario, the polls aren't authenticated or dupes are done. So we developed polling stuff based on DLT, that users' authentication is through DLT, but the polls and all are staying on an Amazon RDS. So I don't know if you understand it, that the authentication piece where there can be fraud is only on DLT. So we developed it, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Hyperledger 0.9 or something. Very early. So, but because of our funding and all, we stopped that project. It's already done and we want to improve upon it. What would you advise, like how wide is the authentication field for DLT, or is that a thing we should use? I mean, it was efficient, like when the people used to open their Android apps or the iPhone apps, it used to open, speak with the DLT and say, okay, because we use the UUID of the phone and certain other abstracts of the phone to build your stuff, the encryption, and it was stored on the phone itself. And an entry equivalent was in the.
It's certainly an interesting use case. I'm not going to pontificate on things that I don't know about. You're definitely getting out of my area of expertise when it comes to that. But I think, the idea that this technology can be applied to rethink a lot of different problems is valid. I do think, I think Robert mentioned it earlier, we were kind of told at times, don't go looking for, just because you have a solution, be careful going to look for problems to fit that solution. So I think you have to examine that closely to see if is it better than what's available today? How does it improve upon what is the industry standards today? And if you think you really got something there that's either more secure, more cost effective, more performant, the kind of things that people are going to be looking at, then it would be something that would probably be worth pursuing. But yeah, it's definitely not in an area that I can speak about from a technical perspective.
I mean, we saw it as a problem is that if there is a polling solution which is not DLT authenticated, then you can simply build a script and throw stuff. Only you can say you can stop the script at the other end if there are multiple entries from a single IP address.
Right.
So a DLT was the authentication hash. So we used it for that. But it was interesting. I being an infrastructure person and not into the coding piece, we developed a 10-person team. I explained them, they went and learned the Hyperledger first, and then they built upon it. So it was interesting that at least we could bring something from a drawing board up to
Yeah.
there.
That's fantastic. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Very.
Thanks.
So as we have 5 minutes left here and we're wrapping up, we'd invite anyone else to, either share their experiences and how they've been able to tackle the different challenges of implementing enterprise blockchain solutions, or ask any more questions to either Gary or Robert. And if we don't have any more questions, again, thank you both to Gary and Robert. And we're always encouraging more people to pitch in ideas as to what they'd want to see presented at future meetups. Or if you want to present, please feel free to reach out to myself. And in the meantime, if you have any more questions for Gary or Robert, I included both their information in the meetup link. And again, thank you all for attending. And again, thank you to our presenters as well.
Chris, thank you for putting this together. Appreciate it. There's effort involved in putting these things together. So thank you for putting in the time.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to have more of these in the
Appreciate
future.
it, Chris. And thank you as well, Gary, for the interesting presentation. And maybe one question to the audience. Something that I'd like to know is, are there any hurdles that you haven't heard today from either Gary or myself that you have experienced, that you have had the challenge and pleasure of tackling? If so, I'd love to hear about those as well from anyone in the audience.
Anyone?
We can say, Mulshankar here again, we can say mostly the TPS, the number of transactions, like Gary says, they have many applications. That means there are number of transactions there. So I want to know, it was my question, so I said I already asked a big question, so whether to avoid it. Anyway, so how about the TPS? Actually we always face the problem in enterprise solution.
Yeah, I think TPS or maybe just scalability is definitely an interesting question. And depending on the DLT you use, it's going to be a different answer. So I'm not sure if you were talking about a specific technology, but definitely an interesting question. And
no, I'm
to see how...
in regards to Hyperledger Fabric, using the Hyperledger Fabric. I know that you design your network in a way that there are multiple factors. But if I have, suppose, ideal network, and suppose there is a ERP solutions is already working, and it is there is a lot of transactions are going on, and while adding as a blockchain as a some part in the blockchain, definitely we have to compromise some speeds or some way to in a way that it should manage whatever the transactions were going on previously before the blockchain. So I'm talking in this regard.
Yeah, I think that comes back again to what Gary said earlier. If you have a solution, but the alternatives are better, then looking into, yeah, that's definitely one of the challenges. Exactly. Blockchain might offer solutions on some perspectives, but then there might be other perspectives that it doesn't, and that other technologies might perform better at. And then I think exactly it's the balance you have to find there.
Agreed. All right.
We have one more question from Joel. I've seen him and Gary have been going back and forth in the chat a little bit. But Joel, if you want to unmute and ask your question really quick. On central banks, I know that's a hot topic of discussion lately.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting together an offshore exchange, and we have an organization, banking organizations that'll hold the FX. We have custodians that'll hold the crypto, and we act as a mediary in between. And we stated that very clearly. And when you deal with other countries or organization, I shouldn't say countries, when you deal with private organizations, they tend to understand that you're not a risk. You're not putting your clients at risk. You're dealing with accredited organizations that hold the value and the assets. But when you use the word crypto, central banks still go crazy and start treating you certainly as something that they're afraid of. But in addition to that, they keep calling you a financial organization. And of course, in terms of getting off the ground, the weight of that is an order of magnitude above the weight of just being a company. And I find that problematic. But they also ask about the technology. So I was wondering if there's some way that the technology can be expressed and clearly show that we are not what they fear. Or I should say, we're not. I mean, they should fear the crypto markets for a variety of reasons, but not what we're trying to start.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's
I would definitely avoid, I think DLT, if you, and we started even using that internally. I told, people on the team, stop saying blockchain, say distributed ledger, right? And so, that kind of changed the conversation a little bit. I would definitely remove the terms crypto and blockchain from your discussions with them. I think, and because you're talking about a distributed ledger. All blockchains are distributed ledgers, not all distributed ledgers are blockchains, right? So in theory, you could potentially do a distributed ledger on a non-blockchain solution and go and have that conversation. So I think Hyperledger, Hyperledger is not a cryptocurrency. So if you're on Hyperledger, you could definitely kind of sell that, but try to avoid even going down that rabbit hole by not really focusing on or emphasizing blockchain or crypto as part of your solution.
Yeah, that I definitely agree in terms of what we write up. We should alter it, as you're saying, but they still want the technology, and I'm trying to find a way of demonstrating on a platform that the business rules preclude us from being part of the risk profile. Because they're obviously very risk averse. I was wondering if there's a platform approach that could make that easier to understand to semi-technical leadership within these organizations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just a few thoughts from my side on that, Joe. I think your challenge that you're dealing with is also part of the challenge, the broader challenge, that is the fact that regulations and legal frameworks tend to lag behind innovations and technical innovations there. So I think, and we've seen this throughout the history many times, I think what we're dealing with right now is exactly that regulations, legal frameworks, certain thought processes of organizations and even people lag behind the actual innovation there that we have today with distributed ledger technology. So hopefully it can be solved, and I do definitely hope so, but we've seen often enough that at one point regulations do catch up. The question is, when will it happen?
Yeah, in the meantime, it's something that should take a month or two is now in like its 8th month of debate. It's just certainly not at internet speed. Yes, definitely a hurdle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, hey, this was a great discussion. I'm glad everybody joined. I'm glad I joined. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again to you both for presenting, and thank you to our audience for attending.
And hopefully we can have a face-to-face meetup at some point again in the future. That would be great.
Soon enough, hopefully.
I'd be happy.
Thank you to our audience for the questions as well and for the discussion. We look forward to having more of these in the future.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
All right. Thank you,
Enjoy the
everyone.
rest of your day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.